Okay, we're ready for that.
Ready?
All right, section, please state your name.
Well, let me just call to order. Good morning. That's fine. Good morning. I'd like to convene this regular meeting of the Audit and Finance Committee for May 13th, 2024. Please have roll. Donna?
Sorry, I'm here, but I couldn't hear it. Couldn't hear my name called. So yes, Donna Colson.
Carter Romero?
Hillsborough,
Leslie Ragsdale.
Nicole Valley,
Los Baños. And then Belmont.
Tom McEwen.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Let me just confirm, I think Jennifer's on the line. Do we need to approve teleconference participation under AB 2449? Jennifer, nope, no need. Okay, great. And I do believe that Donna said she was participating anyway.
Donna
Remotely?
is participating remotely. Her address is listed on the agenda, so
Okay.
members of the public can join her there. Donna, do you have any members of the public with you at your remote location?
There are members of the public that are not attending the meeting. There are 4 members of the public. We're sitting in my living room.
Thank you.
Thank
The
you.
door is open. The door is open and no one has joined us from the beach at Mallorca.
I would like to, yes, please.
Okay, move on to our next item, which is public comment. This is an item on the agenda where anyone from the public may comment on an item that is not on the agenda. Depending on how many people we have in public comment, I will allow 2 minutes. If there are more than 5, I will only allow 1. Do we have any members of the public who want to speak?
We do not have any members of the public online or in person.
And no members in, is it Spain?
Four members of the public who are not participating in the meeting.
No one, trust me, they're having libations. They're not participating. It's cocktail hour here.
They don't want to talk about the budget? Come on.
Okay, I am open to a motion to approve the agenda and to approve the consent calendar items. Let's, Jennifer, can we do those in one motion? Or is it best to maybe just set the agenda and then have an action item on the consent calendar?
One motion.
One motion is sufficient.
Okay, fine. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda and to approve the minutes of August 14th and 11th for the Audit and Finance Committee?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so Ragsdale, second by Hugh.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Is there any public comment on this issue? Seeing none, let's move on to the next item, which is the regular agenda. First item on the regular agenda is the chair's report, and John.
I do not have a chair report today. I will be deferring it to the regular board meeting.
Okay, next item, thank you very much. Next item is the staff report. Do we have any staff reports?
We do.
Okay,
Okay.
morning, Nick.
Morning.
Next meeting.
Ellie, am I doing this wrong? Point that way?
Oh, no, it's me, it's not you.
Okay.
And as Nick is getting that set up, or staff's getting it set up, I do want to say that I am stepping in as interim kind of nothing. I don't have a seat on, I don't have an executive seat on the finance committee, but Donna is well, she's out of the country and she has requested that I chair this, so that is how I get my powers through Donna.
But I believe that you are the chair of the audit. and
You are,
finance.
we're asking, yes, we've asked you, Carlos, to step in as the permanent chair of Audit and Finance if you're amenable.
So after.
Yeah, that's after this.
Yes, so technically chair report right now falls to Donna, who is the current chair, and the next item is the appointment of the new chair.
Okay, so there is Audit and Finance. There's really nothing to report out. We're going to get a budget update and we'll look forward to receiving it.
Okay, are we on staff
Staff report.
report?
Staff report. This says, okay, so we're, okay. So staff report, so, couple things,
Wait, I'm sorry, this is, okay. So Donna, so I just wanna make sure, should appointment of audit and finance committee chair have happened before the staff report, what are we, or? Because
Okay.
it's staff report 5, 6, and 7, that's what you're going into right now.
I was going to, but I can
So,
wait.
okay, so then let's clear up the.
Okay, this order's correct. So the chair report was Donna. Staff report is Nick for things that are not on the agenda, other staff updates.
Oh, okay.
I think you had a slide on that,
Yeah.
correct?
There's this slide is before the staff report, so I don't know if I can go at it.
Nelly probably did it out of order on the
Okay,
PowerPoint,
that's
so
fine.
you can switch the order.
Okay,
up
sure.
there. So sorry, that was my bad.
No problem. Okay,
We're on track.
We are on track.
on track. Okay, staff report, couple things to report out on. First one is cash. As you have all been aware over the last 6 months or so, we've been on this journey to diversify our investments and make sure that we are fully invested, given the higher interest rates today. We want to make sure we're maximizing our return. We are well on our journey there and actually probably complete. We have fully funded camp to the tune of about $140 million. Chandler and PFM have been funded at about 100 million, a little north of that over the last 3+ months. We've also, as I mentioned last meeting, we're trying to minimize our excess cash floating around in non-interest earning accounts. So that's First Republic. So we've done that. And so I think we're in good place from our cash investments, and you'll see that on our P&L, we're earning a nice return on all of that cash. Second item is we had a meeting with Moody's actually a week ago from today. They were in town for another conference and wanted to stop by and meet the new C-suite. They had sent over a list of questions ahead of the meeting, which we addressed in a memo to try and sort of knock those out, which was great. And as a result, the meeting, we focused more on sort of higher level strategic discussions. They really just wanted a meet and greet, as I said, to get to know Sean, myself, and Shalini. While you can never tell how the meeting, what they're thinking, my perspective is it seemed to go extremely well. In our response to their questions, we commented and they noted our updated rate making methodology, where we are no longer pegged to the 5% discount, which they view as very, very much credit positive. So they viewed that favorably. They also noted in our response comments our slight update to our financial reserve policy, where we say that we will take action if our cash dips below a certain level. Again, they view that as very, very credit positive. I actually explicitly asked sort of towards the tail end of the meeting what it might take for us to be upgraded. We are rated Baa1, which is the equivalent of a BBB+ in the S&P world, which people are probably more familiar with. And while they didn't promise anything or commit to anything, they said that things were going very positively. Part of our current rating is due to the newness of the CCA industry in their minds. And as time goes by, and they sort of commented that given the recent legislative policies and regulatory developments, that CCA business model is clearly alive and functioning. So I think they view that as positive. The two policy changes that I mentioned, they viewed as positive. They didn't promise anything. And as we all know who live in rating agency worlds, they're usually slower to go up than down. I wouldn't be surprised, I wouldn't bet my career on it, that we could be upgraded in the next year or so. I wouldn't be surprised when they do their annual review in June/July that maybe they put us on positive outlook. Maybe not, but they could, and then upgrade us a year from then. I don't know, Sean, if you'd add anything to the.
No, I think that's a great summary, and I thought the meeting was very positive, and if you would like, we would be happy to share with you the document that was put together that responded to all of their questions. Nick did a great job pulling us all together. It's a very thorough document, and I think really speaks well for the agency. So we'll send that out to you guys, just as a matter of information. But I also expect that we may have some good news. And if we don't, that's okay too, So if the meeting went well.
Next thing is, as you all remember, hopefully remember, with the board approved sort of moving forward with a possible transaction. We're not approved to do anything, but we want to be in position. Should the markets, assuming the markets stay in great shape. We officially engaged PFM as our financial advisor and Chapman and Cutler as our legal advisor. So those firms are on board and helping us move forward. We also launched an RFP for basically the investment banking services. It's actually, they call it the prepaid supplier, but this is the Goldman Sachs, the Morgan Stanley, the RBC of the world. We sent that out about a week and a half ago. We're expecting their responses. I believe it's the end of this week, and we're planning on presentations from finalists the week of June 3rd with probably Sean, myself, and Roy. So moving forward, moving the ball down the field there. We've been spending a lot of time on the budget and the new 5-year forecast, which I won't jump to there yet because we have a full presentation on that today. We're also going to talk today about the rate stabilization fund. Again, I don't want to preempt it too much, but it's a topic that you may have heard about in the past from Andy Stern, my predecessor, but something that we're recommending moving forward with. And then finally, staffing update. I think I mentioned at our last meeting that we did hire a risk manager, which is great. She is officially on board and started about 2 months ago, Kelly. We've also just extended an offer, and I'm thrilled that they've accepted. I don't want to tell you who it is yet because I don't think they've told their current employer, but it'll be a huge coup. It's a great hire. Someone who's going to be our associate director of rates and strategic analysis. Help us work on a lot of the rate setting decisions or regulatory policies moving forward in the commission, making sure that they have they're impacting our customers in the way we want them to. Someone who's going to help us implement our cost of service rate making, which you've all approved, and also someone who's going to help us work on things with strategic projects, things like the prepay transaction or whatever comes up. So a huge, I think, staffing hire that's starting in end of June. That is staff update report. Any questions?
I was just wondering how the other CCAs were rated by Moody's.
It's a good question. Moody's only rates, I didn't bring it with me, I think 3 of our peers, compared to S&P rates 10 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they used to rate MCE, so maybe it used to be 4. Of the 3 of our peers, Silicon Valley is rated the same as us, Baa1. The other 2 they rate are Clean Power SF and San Jose Clean Energy, thank you, which they rate 2 notches higher than us. But they'll say the reason is because they are part of their, I'm not going to describe it exactly well, they're part of their government.
They're an enterprise fund within the city agency.
Okay.
It's a little different.
It's not a separate JPA.
Deep buckets.
Deep buckets, right?
The big utility I used to work for had a credit rating of AAA asterisk. And the asterisk meant based on the implied backing of the federal government. I think this is the only time they ever did this. But a series of CFOs had convinced the bond rating agencies that our bonds were technically not federal bonds. They were technically issued by our corporation, which was owned by the federal government. But the implication was that if we ever went under, the federal government would back that default, even though they didn't actually have a requirement to do that. So, I wonder if there's anything we could do kind of in that direction that might, help improve over time. So, and I'm new enough, I don't know enough about the legal.
I'm not sure legally that we have that sort of automatic credit guarantee.
Yeah.
Because we're a joint powers agency is by design.
Right.
Has a firewall between our assets and liabilities and your assets and liabilities. Good news is I feel like we stand on our feet very well. And so San Jose is a department within the city, and then Clean Power SF is part of the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, which does all kinds of other things. So I think that makes sense why they're a notch higher, but I think we'll be joining pretty soon. Okay,
Any other questions? If not, are there any questions for the public? None? Appointment of Audit and Finance Committee Chair. Should the Vice Chair also be listed here?
sure, you can do that.
Okay.
Can I just comment really quickly on the little topic we just had about Moody's?
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up. Forgive me.
Oh, no worries. No problem. Not at all. So first of all, Tom, I really appreciate your background on this. This is really helpful and I am really happy you're joining us. So welcome on this committee. The one thing I would say is I wouldn't worry too much about the rating, and we were a little obsessed for a while about having an A or a AAA or an A+ and everything. But I don't think we have to worry too much about it because we're not out doing municipal banking or anything like that. You know, we're just not doing anything that the rating kind of really matters. And the biggest issue and concern I have over it for the long term is if they downgrade your rating, like having your rating downgraded is really bad. So keeping us in the B, BBB, you know, A- range for me is pretty darn good and won't impact our business operations at all.
Thanks.
Thank you, Donna. You're arguing my point. I have always said I'm not quite sure why we're pursuing the ratings, but yes, let's continue. Okay, thank you. Next item then is appointment of Audit and Finance Committee Chair. Do you want to handle this, Donna, from afar, and then we can go from there, Madam Chair? You're on mute.
I can do that. So I would like to basically just appoint or ask for the committee to appoint Carlos Romero as the committee chair. And if she were willing to do it, Leslie Ragsdale as the vice chair of the committee. I think it's good governance for me not to chair or vice chair all these different committees. And I think it's good to have other people participating. So if it's everyone's pleasure, I would love it if I'd be happy to make a motion or someone could second it.
We have a motion on the floor.
And let's also just ask for public comment, even though there's probably no one here.
We shall, let's do that after the motion. All right.
Move approval.
Okay, motion and second. Before we go to that, let's go to the public and see if there are any members of the public who are interested in coming on this item. None? That correct? Or just checking? None. Okay, there are no members of the public here or in the remote location interested in commenting on this. We have a motion on the floor by Colson and seconded by Mr. McCune, Committee Member McCune. All those in favor?
Unfortunately, we can't all those in favor today because Donna's remote.
Okay, well, let us do a roll call vote. Thank you, Donna. Roll call vote, please.
When I say your jurisdiction.
Sorry about that.
Belmont,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
East Palo Alto,
Yes.
Hillsborough?
Yes.
and Los Baños.
Okay, great.
Motion
Motion
passes.
passes. Thank you. Donna, thank you again for chairing this over those many years. And are you an ex officio member of the finance committee, or you're a full member of the finance committee?
Full member.
Full member. Okay, so it's just great. Okay, excellent. So next item is the third quarter fiscal year 2024 financial report in the packet. And please, Nick, you're on.
It's not
This is a
yours.
funny meeting today.
Sorry,
We're getting our bearings.
Brianna and I have switched roles, and
Monday.
so the technology is angry about that.
Right.
So that's what's going on.
It was working.
Hang on one second.
Is it a bad
So
battery?
while Nellie is doing that, I'm gonna just give some kudos to my colleague over here. Nick's been with us how long, Nick? 6 months?
Almost, yeah.
Almost 6 months. But this guy has gotten so much done that
Thank you.
really there was a bottleneck of work that needed to be done. And you've just nailed it every step of the
Thank
way.
you.
So I
Appreciate
do
it.
wanna just say thank you. The budget process has been outstanding so far, so while we're waiting, now I think you're ready.
Great.
It's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
He's
Appreciate
great.
it, Sean.
Not to-
Done it
not
with
to
a smile,
say, but
Nick.
good to
Did everyone hear that behind the mask? Just wanna make sure. I'm just kidding. Okay, so we have 3 items to discuss today. I'm gonna probably spend the least on this first one, which is the Q3 results, although I'm happy to answer any questions and go slower. I just think the other 2 topics are probably maybe more interesting and probably deserve a little more debate and conversation. I usually put this page in the appendix, but I thought I'd put it up front because I think it's a good summary of the punchline of the Q3 results. So this is the quarter that ended March, is that we were basically right on budget. That's the red circle at the bottom, off by $23,000. There were some positives and some negatives that offset each other, so sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, and I'll go through each of those variances, but the punchline is, for the quarter, we basically hit the budget, which means for the year to date, we're basically in the same position we were at the end of 2Q, so no change. So there are a lot of pluses and minuses here, and so we'll go through that, but that's the summary. So first, to start at sort of the top, is load. We continue to be below not only budgeted load, but also last year's load. Part of that, at least through the first half of the year, through maybe December and January, was due to a really mild summer and warmer winter. But we continue to see that variance over the last 2 to 3 months. And we're trying to look under the hood and sort of understand what's driving that, because it's not really due to weather over the last few months. And it seems to be potentially some budgeting issues, or not issues, some maybe updated budgeting and behind the meter forecasting. So maybe underestimating solar generation on customers' rooftops and maybe overestimating what we think EV charging behavior is going to be. We are still looking at this. The result just came in a couple weeks ago. We are also looking at revisiting just our load forecasting methodology for next year. So while we do have a load forecast in there for next year, which I'll go through in the next section, we may be tweaking that over the next month, just because we want to make sure we take the latest learnings from this last quarter and apply that going forward. But you can see on the graph on the right, the actuals, the green is pretty consistently below the blue, which is budget throughout the year. So we want to make sure we understand what's driving that beyond just weather. As far as revenue, we did over in Q3, the circle there, we were about 2% below budget. Most of that, or almost all of it, was due to the load, which I just described before. For the year, we were about $22 million, or 6% below budget. That is due to 2 reasons. One is the lower load, which I referenced, but also the $12 million CARE rebate we gave in December. So about half of the 22 million was due to that, and the other half was just given the load variance that we've been seeing. Cost of energy. In Q3, we were about 2%, so pretty close to budget. However, this is despite the lower load. So all things being equal, we would have expected cost of energy to be down if load is down. The reason that wasn't the case is that we saw pretty significantly higher costs for capacity, RA costs. This was entirely expected, and I think mentioned last year in the budgeting process, or maybe right after the budget was set. So we had planned for this, and then we saw that materialize in the third quarter to the tune of about $5.5 million. We also continue to see higher congestion costs, which has been a theme we've seen throughout the year. When you add those 2 things, this is sort of a summary of the income statement. We've already talked, and for the quarter or year to date, we were about 85 million or $84 million of change in net position. This is net revenues. We already talked about the variance in revenue of about 22 million and the variance in cost of energy of 4.5. So what we call gross profit there, we were about $26 million under budget. However, we made up about half of that, so to speak, with favorability on OpEx, and then $12 million of variance on interest income. When we put this budget together about a year ago, we weren't expecting interest rates to be where they are today. So this has been a wind at our back that we're benefiting from, made about $12.5 million year to date. when we weren't really budgeting for that. And then, as I mentioned, operating expenses has come in pretty significantly below budget. It's across a variety of categories.
Keep going.
It's across a variety of categories. The largest is actually staff compensation. When we put the budget together, we had assumed maybe a little aggressively that we would be fully staffed throughout the year. Obviously, it's taken a little bit of time to hire the right people, and that's resulted in savings of about a little north of $1 million. And then some of the other savings has been just timing based. Communications and marketing is probably the largest variance, and we'll see some of that reverse in the fourth quarter. So net result, as I mentioned, for the year to date is about $10.6 million, and that's exactly almost what it was through the second quarter, because as I mentioned, the third quarter was pretty much right on plan. That has led to, I feel pretty confident saying this, although I didn't fact check it, our most favorable cash position that I believe we've ever had. We are sitting today on about $370 million of cash. That's about 370 days cash on hand. You can see where that cash is held. Camp about 140 and then 100 each in PFM and Chandler. I also mentioned that we're trying to minimize the amount of cash held in First Republic banks. So that's about 15 million that we're targeting. We may try and actually target maybe closer to 10 going forward because we don't earn much of a return there. The 307, both the cash position and the days cash on hand, we will see that reverse over the next year. So I'll talk about that in the budgeting section. But as cost of energy really skyrockets next year, we are going to have to use up a significant portion of that cash next year. But today in great shape. That is it on Q3 results. There's a couple pages in the appendix that aren't too exciting, just monthly revenue trend and cost of energy trend. Any questions before I get into rate stabilization fund?
Full members.
Yeah.
For the benefit of the new guy,
Yeah.
could you just give me a very quick summary of the construction and process of CIP on? There's an entry on the balance sheet for CIP.
Yeah, that I believe is going to be mostly the only construction work we're doing of assets is Gov PV program. So putting the panels on various government buildings.
Government solar.
Government solar.
And yes.
This is a basic question, but just thinking about my own home. If talking about why load has decreased and with the prices being so high, I know we're using the heat a lot less, putting on, sweatshirt and a jacket. And I don't know if that,
Could be. You mean that to account for the,
to account for the reduced load. where-
Yeah.
could be.
Yeah, it's not just the weather, the warmer winter, it's,
Prices.
I'm not turning the heat on because of how expensive it is.
I think you're right. I think customer behavior is driving, and you never know for sure. It's hard to summarize for everyone, but I wouldn't be surprised if both the economy as well as the high prices is impacting people's usage.
Yeah, there's a question. Thank you for that upbeat report. This quarter.
Yeah,
You're telling us about the gray clouds coming.
yeah. Well, yeah.
Next year.
The great
We're
cloud.
managing expectation.
We have to ask for public comment. before we-
Sorry.
Is there any public comment on the fiscal year, the third quarter fiscal year report? Donna? All right, hearing none, let's move on to our next item.
Okay, I think it's a good segue into the next topic.
Rate
Part of the reason we are considering a rate stabilization fund, which I'll go into the details, is because of our really strong financial position this year through the third quarters, and we're expecting that to continue through the fourth quarter. So rate stabilization fund, I realize I'm not an accountant, and I don't think anyone on the committee, maybe Donna is accountant. So I'll try and not get into the nitty gritty of accounting and try and keep it at a high level, but please ask any questions you want. This may have been a topic you heard, I think Andy Stern may have talked about it, maybe not at this committee, but I know it's been something that we've been looking at for a while in the past. And as you can see in the last bullet, several of our peers have implemented such funds. But basically, it's a policy that allows, it's only open to government entities, load servicing entities like PCE, but it also could apply to garbage collecting or water utilities. But allows government entities to recognize the expenses and the revenue from the rates they collect to recover those costs in the same period. The rationale for it, when it was put in place, I don't know, a while ago, I'm guessing, was the understanding that customers in general like stable rates. They don't like to see their monthly bills go up and down. And allows us specifically to avoid rate increases, to address maybe spikes in energy costs, or specific to our industry, offset reductions in rates due to the PCIA. It essentially allows us to defer revenues, so delay the collection of revenues. It's just an accounting methodology in years when financial results are strong, i.e. this year, as I mentioned, could be a good year to do it, to be used in future years when the financial results maybe are not as strong. It could be next year, it could be the year after, there's no time limitation, but it essentially allows us to, this is not a technical term, but bank revenues to be used later on. The third bullet point, it doesn't apply to us today, but we don't have any debt today, we have no financial covenants, but it could be used to potentially meet financial covenants in the future. There could be a requirement to generate a certain amount of change in net position / net revenues. And so this could be a tool in the toolbox to allow us to meet those covenants. The accounting impact, which I have a very sort of high level schematic or table on the next page, but in a sense we would be reducing revenues, so deferring revenues. So revenues would go down, as would our net revenues or change in net position in that current accounting period. It could be a quarter or a year. And then in return, next year or the year after, whenever we want to, we would increase revenue, increase net revenues in the accounting period when that revenue is recognized. So somewhat of a, hopefully a somewhat simple concept. Importantly, this is just accounting. There is no impact on cash. Cash, we all learned, or I learned in business schools, cash is king. So this is nothing to do with cash. Regal, sorry, I apologize. You did tell me that before. Cash is regal. It doesn't rhyme, but I'll try and remember it. Cash is regal.
No alliteration.
So there's no impact on cash, no impact on our change in, our days cash on hand. 4 of our peers already in the past have implemented these rate stabilization funds. And I wouldn't be surprised, given the strong financial results a lot of our peers are having this year. We could see some more implement such a fund this year. I attended a CFO committee meeting, thank you, at the last CCA, and people were talking about this topic. So I'm guessing others are having the exact same conversations we are. So now into the accounting. So this is a made up income statement, made up numbers, but I'm just trying to sort of explain what's going on. So let me do my best to sort of walk from the left to right here. I've somewhat made up numbers to make it, hopefully understandable, but we've got a company, they're actually selling electricity, so it could be us. That is let's make it millions because that sounds more monumental, but $100 million in year 1, 105 in year 2, 110 in year 3, so pretty steady revenues. The costs, however, in this fictitious example are all over the place. So first year it's 85, then 109, then 103. You take revenues less costs, you can see the net revenues or change in net position go from positive to negative to positive. So all over the place. Not a great profile. What we would do in this situation ideally would be to adjust revenues to match those costs so that we aren't losing money in year 2. But we have magically the rate stabilization funds, which allows us to not have to do that. So let's move to the table on the right, which is with a rate stabilization fund implemented and using that rate stabilization fund. In year 1, and again, I made up these numbers just so there's no method to it, but in year 1, we would defer revenues. So $10 million would be moved from basically year 1 into year 2. It doesn't have to be year 2, but that's the way it works in this example. And as a result, just by reducing the revenues in year 1, Instead of 15 million of change in net position, it's 5. And then on the flip side, in year 2, we recognize those revenues. So revenues goes up by 10 million, no change in costs. And instead of losing 4 million, we're making $6 million or positive net revenues. So in effect, we're smoothing out our net revenues. So instead of that lumpy positive to negative to positive, it's 5, 6, 7. Again, I made up those numbers to make it look good, but you get the point. I also highlighted here that on the balance sheet, there is no change in cash. Before it was 15, then 11, because we lost money, then 18, same exact cash position on the right. On the balance sheet, we would book the deferrals, and the 10 million would show up on the balance sheet, and then we would reverse it in the next year. So a very high level, hopefully just trying to explain what happens on the accounting without getting too much in the weeds. Any questions on this? Okay, good. That's success then. I was worried.
I mean, I think it's not super complicated.
It's not, but I just
You're,
wanted to.
I think it's great. I mean, you're allowed to defer income and use it the next year or 2 years later as you need it to smooth our budget impact. So that you're
Exactly.
not having to show a deficit right off the top.
Exactly. And it's a tool in the toolbox that's available to entities like ourselves. I see no reason not to use it. And so that's why we're bringing, it's also an opportune time, given the strong financial position this year. We are currently forecasting to have a positive change in net position of almost $100 million. So it's an opportune time, should we want to defer some revenues this year, to be used in future years. We did propose some guidelines. This is not. Sorry.
Yeah, I just had a question about disclosures. Will we have to, in our annual audits, disclose that we're utilizing that particular accounting method?
Yes.
Either in the notes or?
It'll be in the notes, and then it'll be on the income statement, just that it'll say, deferral of revenues to rate stabilization fund and recognition of revenues. So I've looked at the 4 CCAs that have it, and it's very clear.
Okay.
And it'll be on the balance sheet.
Yes, and
It's a
you'll
lot.
see the
It's a
10
lot.
million, yeah, exactly. It'll be booked to the balance sheet, and it'll be in the notes section explaining gas 462, I think it is. And we've been working with Maher, who is our external accountant, on this to make sure we implement it correctly. Maher is the accounting firm that works with, I think, all of the CCAs, and so they've implemented with MCE and CPA, some of the other CCAs. So we tried to propose some guidelines so that this is not carte blanche and sort of limitations on what it can be used for. This is our proposal, but we're open to feedback, of course. We would consider deferring revenues. We don't have to, but if our change in net position is greater than 3% of revenue, we would consider it and bring, decide what we want to do. We can't defer revenues carte blanche into, an unlimited amount. So we've put a limitation on the amount of revenues that can be deferred to 15% of revenues. So if it's, we're about $500 million of revenue, that means about $75 million would be the most that could be deferred in total. You could defer 50 one year, and then another 25 the next year to that 75, but it couldn't be more than 15% of revenue. We would recognize those revenues, so basically withdraw the revenues from the fund if our change in net possession is going to be negative, or maybe if we have to satisfy certain covenants, would be another reason. And then we would obviously notify the board after a transfer or a deferral, the deferral or recognition of revenue is made. So that is our proposed guidelines.
Questions on this? I have one. So is that once the money is in this account, are we only allowed to use it for the stabilization piece? So we've locked it away just for the stabilization.
Well, I just want to clarify, there's no actual cash being put aside.
Yeah, it's a booking.
It's a booking. So, but yes, the only way to reverse it would be to recognize the revenue. We could, it's interesting. It's called a rate stabilization fund, and the goal initially was to stabilize rates. It's not actually being used by most CCAs for that purpose, but that is the guideline that we're operating under. But basically, we could recognize the revenue whenever we want to.
Yeah. Okay.
It could also be called a balancing account, correct?
Yeah.
So some people do call it that.
Yeah,
instead of-
utility, the PG&Es of the world, the IOUs have
About
balancing.
100.
Call it a balance.
Yeah, memorandum accounts, balancing accounts.
Okay. Yes.
One observation on that. One thing I mentioned to Nick while we were setting up the meeting. I used to work for a big utility, but today I work with people who do marketing and branding stuff. The number one all-time most successful marketing message is free. The second most successful marketing message is sale, discount, rebate, cash back, kind of stuff. So, and we were talking about it in a slightly different context, but I think from the customer's point of view, rate stabilization fund sounds kind of abstract and it sounds good, but it's like to most customers, that's like, I don't really get it. This has nothing to do with accounting and finance, just in terms of messaging to the customers. If we can position a number of these things sort of as, look what PCE is doing for you. Here's something that PCE is actually providing to you as a benefit. It's just naming and branding, but I think that this is certainly the right thing to do, but I think there's a way to message it to the customer. That is,
And honestly, to be sure, the reason that we would do this is so that we can continue to offer healthy discounts to our customers,
Right.
right? Instead of not being able to do that because we have a new rate setting methodology that says we shall set rates according to our revenue requirements, right? So this is absolutely in the service of that.
Totally.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking about the discussion we had last time about the pass-through of PG&E increases. And, you know, I think again, it's totally branding and messaging stuff. It would be better to pass through the increase and then say, but we're giving you a rebate, you know, those no good nicks at PG&E raised it, but we're giving it back to you. It's totally messaging.
Agreed. No good nicks at PG&E, goodness gracious. Okay,
Okay, so our recommendation is basically to establish this fund, rate stabilization fund under GAS 62. I know that doesn't mean anything to you, but that's the accounting rule to allow us to help stabilize rates for customers and then to authorize the CEO and CFO to make these transactions as prudent and appropriate under the guidelines that I just shared on the prior page.
Discussion. Sorry. Yeah, I want to go back to the committee.
I was just gonna say the 3% and I think it was 15% in the guidelines, which thank you. Did those come from what the other CCAs are doing, or do you need from the board a little more flexibility in those numbers? I don't wanna hem you guys in with those particular numbers.
Plagiarism is the highest form of compliments. So yes, I did take most of the numbers on this page from our peer utilities. Only 2 of them have public policies. The rest have internal guidelines. I think it's MCE is one and maybe CPA. So MCE has the 3% of revenues. In full disclosure, their maximum amount is 10%. I increased it to 15 to give ourselves a little more flexibility. But the 3% comes from MCE as well as the other end that if it's negative or to satisfy covenants. So I admit I did not completely make up those words.
and is there any limitation prescribed by the law? We're well within, okay,
No.
all right, wow.
It's just setting some board guidelines or.
Okay.
So as hard as it is to predict the future, what type of fluctuations are we perhaps envisioning, and how large would those, negative balances be? The 75 cover, 75 million to 15, we're saying it's about 75 million. The maximum amount.
Yeah, well, we will see in the next section, we have the budget, as well as the 5-year forecast. We are proposing, not to jump too far ahead, but a deferral of 65 million this year, so almost the 75 million limit. which according to our budget should be sufficient over the next 2 years are the most challenging from an energy cost perspective. And so I do think, that's why I increased it from 10 to 15%, but I do think 50, it should cover it. Yeah, and you made a good point. Can't predict the future, but that's our best guess.
Thank you.
The next 2 years are very tight.
Donna, do you have any questions?
No, I think this is a really smart move and very thoughtful on, and I appreciate Nick, you know, looking into it and researching it and bringing it to our attention. Seems great to me. And I'm fine with whatever the staff wants on the ranges.
Thank you. Let's move to the public. Is there anyone that wants to comment on this who's in the public? They're virtual or person?
Public comment.
Okay, no public comment. Do you require a vote on this?
I think it's maybe just a motion to remand it to the Board of Directors for approval.
Okay, open to a motion.
I'll move to recommend the rate stabilization fund as proposed in the presentation to the board for approval.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion, second, motion by Ragsdale, second by Kuhn. Roll call vote, please.
When I call your jurisdiction, please state your name. Belmont,
Tom McHugh, yes.
Burlingame,
Burlingame, Donna?
Oh, sorry, Donna Colson, yes.
East Palo Alto,
Carlos Romero, yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes, Leslie Ragsdale.
and then Los Banos.
No, okay, great, motion
Motion.
passes, thank you. Okay, our next item is a review of our fiscal year 2024-2025 draft budget.
Great.
Is this you?
This is me again.
Nick's show today.
So this is our preliminary budget. This is probably hopefully the most interesting topic of the morning, or pre-executive committee at least. Again, I'll stress preliminary, so we are still refining things like our load. I think it's 90% there, but we are still refining our load, and then of course we'll take feedback. We are not presenting this to the board until June. We've also have some rough estimates of what PG&E is going to do with their rates on July 1st, but we'll hopefully get more information in June, which could inform it. But so first, and hopefully I have Raphael here to help with the programs. And I think, Roy, are you on the call? Okay, great. So Roy and Raphael and Haley here is from my team.
Roy and I don't think they're promoted to panelists though, so they're in the
Okay, and also like to as Sean mentioned about me, Haley, who I think you all know is on my team. This is the team. And so has done a Herculean amount of work. The team is growing, thankfully, so hopefully we'll have more, but has done a Herculean amount of work. So hopefully, please jump in if have more. We have tons more detail than we're presenting in PowerPoint, of course. We wanted to keep it sort of board level, but there's a lot of detail behind these numbers. And the first topic is cost of energy. I'm hoping this isn't a huge surprise for everyone because there's been several meetings around this topic on sort of the significant increase we've seen in the cost of energy, specifically things like RECs and RA costs. So hopefully not a huge surprise, although I do realize when you see sometimes the numbers on the page, it may be shocking. But you can see at the top, and this is a page that'll basically be the same format for all of the cost categories. We're starting with costs, first of all, which I'll highlight is a little weird for me because usually when you talk about a budget, you start with revenues and you go down the income statement. Because of our new rate setting approach, our revenues are based on what our costs are. So first we have to talk about costs. So we're going to talk all about costs from the most cost to the least. So starting at obviously cost of energy represents about 90% of our budget. And this is a format you'll see for all of the cost categories I've listed. We could go back further, but I thought the most relevant would be these are fiscal years, fiscal year 2023, fiscal year 2024, which is the current year we're in. So this is 9 months of actual through March, and then the remaining 3 months forecast. So it's our best estimate of how we're going to end up for the year. It may change, but it's an estimate. And then we've got the most important number here is the 2025 forecast, basically the budget we're looking to implement and get approved. And then we put on the right there the variance just between 25 and 24, both in dollars. These are actually not million, these are actual dollars, and the percent. So obviously a huge increase of about $104 million year over year, which represents 31%. So you're obviously probably asking what's driving that increase. A couple things. The first one is the significantly higher prices we're seeing in the market for RECs, GHG free prices, and capacity prices. We put a little mini table on the bottom right there, which I've circled the big numbers. Those are high numbers. That is the year over year percentage change. We didn't want to put the actual dollars because we didn't want to share, these are public documents, but you can see 69%, 450%, 46% increase in these prices. We're also seeing a 9% increase in just the cost of energy. That's significant of its own, but obviously the driver of the 31% is the increase in those costs, which we're having to procure in the market. We also included in the forecast a contingency. You may remember from last year's, before my time, we had talked about a 10% contingency, which would be about $40 million. Given where we are in the budgeting process and the remaining unknowns and what we haven't hedged, we do think it's more appropriate about 7.5% of contingency. So it's about $30 million in here of cushion, extra costs here that hopefully don't materialize. If they don't, they'll drop to the bottom line, but that's what we've included in the budget. I'll also note that we are forecasting a load increase. As I mentioned before, we are revisiting our load forecasting. So these numbers may change a little bit. But as I mentioned, this year has been a pretty mild summer and warm winter. If we're expecting a normal year next year, that would be about a 5% year over year increase. And then we're also, as I think you're all aware, we're seeing or will see significant new commercial load come online. Google, Caltrain are probably the biggest customers I think you've all been heard of. So that's about 8% or 9% is load. The remaining increase is the cost of these products. The table on the left tries to break down what's in dollars, what's driving the $104 million. So you can see energy, that's largely due to the load increase of about $35 million. And then the REC capacity and contingency numbers. I'll pause because these are big numbers and I want to, hopefully not a huge surprise, but this is a big portion of our cost profile. And Roy's on the phone to answer hopefully any questions I can't.
Remember?
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Okay, that's great.
We don't have to like it.
Yeah, can you just explain capacity to me again? What exactly is that?
I'll turn over to Roy hopefully, but this is RA, resource adequacy, which basically I believe it's the state's requirement, Roy, for us to all load service entities to make sure that there is enough power on demand. I'm probably not describing it exactly well there in case we have a huge heat wave or everyone turns the lights on at the same time. I'm joking, of course, on that, but Roy?
Yes,
Yeah, that's
that's correct, Nick.
Oh.
Thank you very much. Roche, Director of Power Resources. Yes, capacity in this table means resource adequacy in the table to the right. As you can see, the price of resource adequacy has risen to 46% higher than what we projected last year. And RA is a compliance requirement that we're mandated to meet or else we'll get a penalty. And this is the way for state regulatory agency to make sure that a PCE contributes its share of the reliability for the grid. And we have to make sure that we procure enough capacity to serve the grid every month. And that's what it is. And if you recall, last year during the surplus fund discussion, there was $30 million set aside for capacity in 2024. That's calendar year 2024. And this $36 million here reflects that $30 million, which is already sort of granted through the surplus fund discussion. Yeah.
And right, just to understand, we're procuring this, but not necessarily using it, correct?
We are using it in a way of demonstrating compliance. And if you using it means running the plant, not necessarily. It just have to be available. So we're buying capacity to be available for the grid to use it anytime it wants. Usually it's, during summertime is the most concerning.
Yeah.
The grid wants to make sure you have enough capacity to run the system. It doesn't necessarily mean that every month, every day, every hour, when we offer capacity to the market, that the market actually dispatches the resource. No.
And so if it's not dispatched, we purchase the capacity, is there some resale of that purchased capacity at a much lower rate? Because obviously there's probably less demand.
So the capacity, so if it's actually dispatched, then it becomes energy. So that's the energy line item. If it's not, so capacity is, or RA is a planning tool. So it's all done in a year ahead or month ahead basis. So there is no real-time trading of capacity. So we have to transact capacity, either that's buy or sale 45 days before the showing month. So for example, for October, it will be August 15th is when we have to either buy or sell the capacity for October. So it's not a real-time thing where you find, okay, we don't need it, the grid doesn't need it, then you can sell it. It's too late at that time. It's a planning tool. It's not a real-time dispatch.
Got it, okay.
I view it as insurance that everyone has to contribute to make sure there's enough power plants sitting by idle in case needed.
Yes, that's the appropriate analogy in this case.
Right.
Very expensive.
Yeah.
Like all insurance.
Don't get me started.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
that's cost of energy. Okay, programs. This is our second largest category, also a large increase, but I'm hoping not a surprise to many of you. We were forecasting this a year ago through the budgeting process, and we're somewhat on plan. It's a little higher than what we were expecting. But again, that was due to the surplus funds, so it shouldn't be a huge surprise. But you can see here, going from 13 million to about $27 million year over year. That's that's a doubling, more than a doubling. What's driving that? First thing is surplus funds committee. A lot of funds were allocated to program spend, member agency grants, school building electrification, I think are the two largest programs. We're also seeing a rollout of new programs, government building electrification, turnkey building electrification, and Resi PV plus storage programs. And then we're ramping up our existing programs that have been around for a while, home upgrades, the appliance programs we have, and then EV charging. Listed on the bottom, it's a little bit small on the page, so I apologize sort of where the dollars fall. So if you had any questions, Raphael's here. But you can see most of the 27 million is going into building. This is building electrification, Resi, it's home upgrades, things like that. We've also continued to spend on our EV Ready program, about $4 million. And then even though the surplus funds allocated, I think it's about 12 or 13 million of member agency grants, we're only expecting about 3 million to be distributed in this coming fiscal year. So those are the red circles, and you can see what makes up the remaining of the $27 million. Any questions here? Okay, great. Moving along. This is sort of a new page. We haven't had capital programs. Tom, you had asked about the construction process. We are now seeing increasing amount of balance sheet outlays. This is, actually spending on equipment and property out there. We're also seeing some revenues come in from those capital outlays, as well as what we call external revenues. So this is a page that I don't think we've shown in the past, or I don't know how it was shared, but we'll continue showing it going forward. And the numbers are getting pretty large, as you can see. These numbers don't, except for the balance sheet outlays, they don't impact our income statement, which we're probably most familiar with, but they do impact cash. This is cash that we're spending, upfront cash, example for the Gov PV program that we expect to be ideally repaid over the next 20 years through energy payments or on-bill financing through repayment. So Expanded capital program, GovPV is by far the largest. These are programs you should be, I think you're aware of. Most of this relates to GovPV 2. The $21 million, this is the next the second round that we've launched. I think there's some dollars in here for GovPV 1, but most of it is GovPV 2. We also have some funds here that have been allocated from the surplus funds committee process. So financing for our government building electrification as well as residential storage. So those make up the vast majority of our capital program. We do expect some of that capital to come back to us. It's going to take 20 years. So the numbers won't equal for a while, but the idea is that they're at some point will be self-financing. So on-bill financing revenue comes back to us. The PPAs we sign with the government buildings, that's the DER Gov Solar coming back. And then the GovBE revenue, again, is the return of capital from the government electrification projects. We also have some at the top. This is a little more lumpy, but some external revenue that we're expecting next year particularly. It won't continue with these numbers, but for next year, we're seeing the flex market revenue, the CPC revenue, which is basically a wash to the expense I showed you on the prior page. Menlo Park grant and return of Cal E VIP funds. They didn't spend all the capital or money that was given to them, so that money will be coming back this year. So it's lumpy. These won't be the same. It's not something that's going to continue every year, but next year we're seeing about $5 million of revenue that's in the income statements.
Can I ask you to just illuminate too, we've got some anticipated money coming back in through the Inflation Reduction Act direct pay feature, right, for GovPV? When does all of that begin to get booked? Later on, yes?
So
Thank you, sorry.
No, it's later, but
It's
the,
later.
the GovPV programs where we own and operate the solar panels and we're capitalizing those are eligible for the investment tax credit under federal law. And the Inflation Reduction Act established a new provision whereby nonprofits could secure those tax credits, even though they don't have tax liability. And that's through a mechanism called direct pay, or more currently now elective pay. When the solar systems come online, then in the subsequent calendar year, they are eligible to recoup the investment tax credit, or ITC, which is about 30% of the capital cost. And so the first system to come online last year was Brisbane's Mission Blue Solar facility, and that one is actually going through. We've done the filing, and we're supposed to get the initial tranche here this year sometime. We don't know exactly when, hopefully this year.
We're gonna frame the check.
But it's very, very small. And so it's not actually, there's not actually much in here. In fact, I don't even know that we put a number in this fiscal year, but this year we will have a bunch going online. And so the next calendar year, then we'll be filing for ITC for all of the systems that came online this year, which is 11 systems out of the first round of the program.
But that'll show up here.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
All right, and that'll be a new line item somewhere
Yes.
in the revenue.
cap inflow probably.
Inflow, inflow, perfect, thank you.
What's the tax credit capture period? Doesn't occur in one fiscal year, is it over several years?
No, it's all in 1 year. So the entire 30% comes immediately in IRS terms.
Right, but that's a great question, because it used to be a 7-year. And probably still is for certain other projects.
Well, you still have to.
And many other tax programs are structured that way. So that's what makes this tax credit so incredibly valuable. Kicks up your net present value of an investment in a big way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so those are, any questions before we move on? Those are, I think, represent 95% of our costs. The next section is sort of the other operating costs, sometimes get more attention, but smaller dollar amounts. First one I want to talk about is compensations. This is staff costs plus the benefits that we pay staff. You can see at the top, in addition to the dollar amount, I've listed the end of year FTE, full-time equivalent. So you can see that growth from 39 employees to 53 we're forecasting at the end of this year, up to 61 next year, which I'll get into in a second. And then just percentage of revenue, which is a good benchmark, which allows us to compare against our peers to make sure we're in line with their staffing compensation costs. You can see a pretty significant increase on the right, about 39%, $3.8 million. That's due to two things. The first is just, it's obviously staff times what we pay staff. So we've seen a significant increase in headcount. This current fiscal year, we're projecting 14 new headcount. I think we have 2 more to be hired this year. So assuming they come online, we'll be at 53 employees. 3 of those 14 were vacancies from the prior year. They're actually my position, the COO position, and our community relation person in Los Baños. The other 11 were new positions that were added. For the next fiscal year, we are proposing 8 additional headcount, so less than last year. I will note that 4 of those 8, so half of them, are for the proposed in-house customer contact center, which we're going to talk about in the next meeting. That's for a new manager, which as well as 3 new reps, eventually growing to 4 reps down the road. But so half of them are for that endeavor. We've also included a salary increase here, 7% for next year. That consists of 2 components. One is, a traditional merit plus COLA increase of about 5%. And then we have engaged, I think we've shared with this committee, Mercer, to do a benchmarking analysis. And there likely be some selective market adjustments for employees of maybe on average about 2%, not everyone, but on average. That's what gets you to the 7%. So you put those two, the number of headcount as well as the salary increase, that drives the percentage, the total dollar amount. I did put a bullet point here just because of the timing of headcount. It looks like a pretty significant increase this year. If you pro forma, so assume that we are fully staffed this current fiscal year, the increase next year would only be about 18%. And that 18% again is due to the 8 additional headcount as well as the 7% salary increase. Any questions?
I don't know, Donna, I don't know if you want to chime in on this one too, but initially we had these concerns about pay increases compared to what our cities are getting. I think we're probably going to wind up in the 5% range with our bargaining units, but you may get, I don't know where other cities are, Donna, but you may get some pushback from members of the board because they're going to say, well, we're only giving 3% or 3.5% because, whatever. And so that's just, you probably know that, but if not, I mean, that has occurred in past board meetings. So just to be prepared, I think this is reasonable for where we are in our growth and our income, but it's just something to keep in mind. Maybe Donna, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, we were closer to 4.5%, 5% on our contract settlement for our negotiations. But I do think we're a little different of an agency. We're not the cities, and we have to pull out of essentially a more competitive, a different market, not necessarily a service market, but people who can easily transfer these skills into, a private sector job. But I know most people don't work here because of the enormous salaries we pay. They work here because they're passionate about what the work they do. So I'm pretty, overall, I think the budget, I just want to compliment you, Nick, on, really having just got down into the details and having put such a comprehensive budget together and so clear on your explanation. I know this is your first time at this, and it was a really succinct and, strong presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So one thing I would like to add here this is a very thank you for the comment. I think we should also here indicate that PCE has a compensation philosophy that is at 50%. So we're not paying at sort of 100% of the market. We're not paying at 25% of the market. We're trying to meet that middle ground. And the market adjustments that you see there are something that we don't anticipate having to do every year. We're in a little bit of catch up for certain positions. Primarily, our more junior positions need to come up to meet the cost of living where we are. And so that's a kind of a periodic, it won't happen every year, but I do think that's good kind of framing, Carlos, to help people understand where we're coming from.
Okay.
Any other questions from committee members or?
So the last page on the costs is all the other line items, which aren't huge dollar amounts, but they take up a lot of real estate on the page. So these are all of our other operating costs. Calpine, who is our data manager, and then PG&E, who we pay for administrating a lot of services. Those costs are pretty stable, so that's the positive news. They're actually going down a little bit. All the other categories, we are seeing some increase, and I've tried to summarize. Again, there's tons of detail behind these numbers, but what's driving some of the increases? Consulting, most of it's due to some battery resource projects that we're hoping to implement. These may get delayed, but battery optimization, there's a transmission project, and then there's some reclass of fees. So that's not really an increase, but moving it from cost of energy into this category. We are anticipating an increase in legal costs. Again, this depends on the work that's needed, so it may or may not materialize, but in the budget, we have an increase due to additional federal support as well as power resources. There is a fair amount going on the communications and marketing side, which I'm sure you'll be briefed on at some point. So we put in an increase here for branding, marketing. We need a revisit. We need a complete redo, I think, of our website. So there's budget in for that next fiscal year, as well as additional payout to our community partners and school grant programs. And then the G&A increase is mostly due to software across a variety of departments. The list is pretty long of software that we're looking to implement. I'd say the largest department is power resources, not surprising, but that's driving an increase in that category. Okay, so those are all costs. Now we get into what should revenues be to cover those costs. And in the old days, remember, we would have just done a flat 5% to PG&E. Here we are taking a different approach. And so let me walk you through this table. It's the first time you would have seen a table like this. So I'll try and explain what you're looking at. We ran 3 scenarios. We could have run many more, and we're open to running different ones, but we ran 3 that we thought would be impact or relevant. The first column on the left is no rate change. So let's just pretend PCE rates where they are today. Let's continue and carry those through to next fiscal year. Obviously, there's some increase in load, so there's an increase in revenue, but rates are staying the same. That would result, just to walk through that scenario, that will result in a positive change in net position of about $8.5 million. You can see the cash in days cash on hand. Importantly, it would result in pretty much parity to PG&E's rates. We are anticipating PG&E is going to be decreasing their rates by 11% on July 1st. We don't know for sure, so this will be confirmed in June, but there was a balance, under collection that they were going to be collecting over the next 6 months from January 1 to June 30th. That will roll off on July 1st. So all the consultants are expecting about an 11% decrease in rate. So if we do nothing, some of our customers will actually be at a premium to PG&E. Some will be at a discount, but on average, it's be about parity. So that's just a data point. We're not recommending that. You can see we box what we're recommending, but wanted to at least show that scenario. The next scenario is under our rate setting methodology, we had talked about we want to set rates such that we basically cover our costs, maybe a slight positive change net position, but just to make it easy, we ran a scenario of what we call break even. So let's say revenues are about the exact same as costs. So you can see revenues of 487. We know the costs, which I just walked through all those categories, is about 487. That will result in 0 change in net position. You can see the resulting cash. Another important data point, that would result in about a 3% discount to PG&E. Not bad, 3%, it's not 5%, but that's that scenario. The last column we looked at is, what if we wanted to offer our 5% discount? It's what, we don't have to, but it's a scenario. It could be more, it could be less, but let's just run a scenario at 5%. What does that look like? To be able to offer a 5% discount and not have a negative change in net position, we would need to recognize $15 million from a rate stabilization fund. I know we haven't gotten into what we're doing this current fiscal year, which will be on the next page, but to be able to show the 3 million of positive change in net position, we would need to recognize 15 million of revenue to do that. We can do that. You can see our days cash position of 248 days. So that's well within our policy guidance of 180 to 250, and you can see the resulting discount to PG&E of 5%. This is the scenario we're recommending. We can afford it from a cash perspective this year. And thanks to the rate stabilization fund, we can recognize $15 million to show that positive change in net position. So that is the scenario that we are at least recommending at this point.
Questions, and again, that keeps us at our 5% discount.
It keeps us at a 5%
At all levels.
at all levels. That's resetting everyone. Yep.
And if PG&E's decrease is not 11%, because originally, up until about 30 days ago-ish, 45 days ago, we thought it was actually going to be 7%.
Yeah.
Which is what we came into the beginning of the year understanding, and that number has varied, right? So you don't know until that actually occurs in June. So it could be that if it does come in below 11%, you know, we may be able to offer either deeper discount or don't move money from the rate stabilization fund. So some of this will be dialed in much more clearly once we understand what their discount's going to be.
And any questions? Donna, you're fine over there? She there? Okay.
Okay.
We're probably getting ahead of the game, but we're have we figured out how the, you know, is it CPUC's flat fee decision is gonna impact us?
Oh, the income graduated?
Right, yeah.
Have not, and it is not reflected in our budget
Okay.
as yet.
And
Because
that, they implement that in 2025 or 2026?
I believe it's 26.
I don't know.
I believe it's 26, but we'll double check and get back to you.
Yeah, I think that'll give us.
Jeremy
plenty
will
of
be
educating
online with
ahead.
us. Jeremy will be on during the executive committee and we can ask and get back to
Great,
you.
all right. Okay,
There's more, but I just want to
More.
make sure, because
Yeah.
this will then lead to the next section on what the total 5-year plan is, which we've assumed the red box, the scenario, the 5% discount, which will be tweaked as we get closer to July.
carry on.
Okay, so what does that look like, you know, using the format of the 3 different years? You can see, I think importantly, the 2024 columns, the middle one, we've assumed, I already mentioned this to you, Carlos, $65 million of deferral of revenue in that year. That number will be refined, but that's what we've assumed for now. And then we've assumed 15 million of recognized of that 65 in the next year. So obviously that still leaves 50 million, 50 million that could be recognized in future years. So you can see the resulting revenue. It does look, if you look at the bottom row, it looks like revenue's going down, but again, it's just because it will show that way on the income statement, but it's because of the deferral of revenue. If you take out the impact of the rate stabilization fund, that's the red circle on the right, it's about a 6% increase in revenue, and that's driven mostly by load increase. So that's revenue. So punchline, the next page, which I realize is really hard to look at up here. I don't know what I could have done.
Next time we'll print out copies.
Okay, great idea. Yeah, great point. This is the 5-year forecast. We're not, obviously the board is not necessarily approving beyond just 1 year budget, but understandably, if I was a board member, you want to see what does it look like past this current year. So we have the 5-year forecast. I've put some red boxes because I apologize. I realize it's a lot of numbers and hopefully don't get fixated too much on, what legal costs are going to be in 2029. There's a lot of estimates in there. The 2025 column we've talked about. So hopefully those numbers, well, I'm not saying you'd recognize all of them, but those are the numbers that we just sort of discussed. And you can see the resulting, which I showed in that scenario, 248 days cash on hand and about 3 million of change in net position. You can see the outer years going forward. 2026, as I mentioned, is another challenging year from a cost of energy perspective. Again, these are estimates and there's a large contingency in there, but we are forecasting 472 million of cost of energy costs in that year. In order to not lose money that year, negative change in that position, we are proposing or anticipating recognizing some of the rate stabilization funds in that year. 20 million there, it could be more, it could be less. We'll hopefully get a better idea as we get closer, but that gives you an idea of why we think close to 65 million is sufficient and gives us some cushion for the outer years. I will say, we don't know what PG&E rates are going to be. We're guessing 11% on July 1. It's even more of a guess what they're going to be after that. The consultants have their estimates and we put those in, but I wouldn't count on them. And so it's hard to understand, what the discount or premium would be in the outer years. We're taking the approach here of the revenue sufficient to cover costs.
Question or any comments? Otherwise, we're almost at the end of this meeting. We're still above our 180 days, right? And it's 250 is the cap of the cap and the collar.
Yeah.
It's the target.
Right,
That's the high end, but yeah, we're within that for every year, as you can
Right.
see.
Okay.
It does come down, as you see, 25 is sort of the low point. That
Yeah.
is, based on our estimates, the high point of cost of energy prices, knock on wood.
Okay. Donna, do you have any comments, questions?
No, I think this looks good. I appreciate the 5-year forecast. I think it'd be interesting to kind of, Nick, to keep like a rolling, sort of comparison variance analysis as we sort of roll through this and see how accurate we are with everything, just so we can understand if we have a continuing over or underestimate on anything that we just could routinely adjust. And then I forgot to ask, but it ties in. Did you run this by Moody's? Did you run that, rebalancing technique and?
Yeah, you know what, Donna, apologies, I had COVID last Monday, so I was there, but virtually, did not come up.
We did
Oh,
not.
no, okay.
I would be a little, I purposely didn't want, it's, if they should look through the rate stabilization fund because it doesn't impact cash.
Okay.
I don't want to raise it. I'm not trying to sneak one past the goal, so to speak, but I also don't want to raise it. What do you think about doing this? I'm sure they're not going to love it. They would prefer us to adjust rates higher and lower and make sure we're showing a positive.
Okay, no problem. I just wanted to know if we had run it by, maybe check with MCE or the other groups that are doing this and see if they've had any feedback from the rating agencies on it. Like, oh yeah, they signed off on that. It was all good and kosher, or we haven't brought it up and we're all consistent around it. I think that's fine.
We'll do that, Donna, and Nick will get back to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
No problem.
Just small logistical comment, if you don't want to print it out. You can read it all on here except the header. So just to figure out which year is which. Laptops anyway.
Okay. So we have a couple of minutes to go. Any public comment on this, first of all? Do we have any? Seeing none, okay, move on to the last item, which is community member reports. Are there any? Okay. Seeing none. Meeting adjourned, all right.
All right.
Report 10.
Good job.
That was a packed meeting today.